Hi everyone, good afternoon. It's Wednesdays with English with a Twist. This is Shanti Kumaraswamy Street calling from a foggy, dull, rather drizzly London. Hope everyone's well. So it's our lesson 5 today on our weekly classes. So I'm really excited for today's lesson. And I hope you can all join me. So please, as you join, please drop me a line. Tell me where you're from, what time it is where you are. And, let's get this lesson going. So today it's a bit slightly different today, our class. We're going to be looking at how to do business with the British. As you know, I live in the UK, and in fact, I came to the UK about 31 years ago. Wow, time flies, I'm old. When I came to university, and I stayed in this country, and I then decided to stay here, find a job, and I built my career in the UK. So I had 20 years in the world of business through the insurance industry and also investment management. And that was 20 years before I then became changed my career and became an English language trainer. Hi Poonam, hi Abdullah, nice to see you here again. Thanks so much. You guys are hardcore fans. That's so great to see you here again. So as I was saying, I grew up, really my career, my business, my professional life was very much here, and I grew to learn how to deal with the British because I'm not English. I am half Italian, half Indian. So for me it was a big difference in culture and how to deal with that. And many people have sort of asked me over time, how do we deal with the British? Because business is not just about the English language and having a good communication. It's also about different cultures and how we adapt to those different cultures. So I thought that would be a great idea to start off with, looking at how you have to deal with the British when you're doing business with them. Now, there are many stereotypes, aren't there? There are some people who've got this idea of the British. In the past, people would think of you men with bowler hats, the black bowler hats, which is fine. Some of you who, if you had been following Downton Abbey, this big series on an aristocratic family at the beginning of the 20th century, you would have followed, this wonderful world that was before the start of this First World War and the Second World War, where you had the aristocrats and then you had the servants, and everyone spoke impeccably, very wonderful English. And people have this stereotype about how the British speak. And in fact, the accents that most people think, I get a lot of learners saying to me, "Oh, Shanti, I'd like to learn, speak like the British." But what accent are we talking about? Most of the accent that most people associate with the British is the Southern English accent. What is spoken around London, around the Thames area. But, Britain is a lot bigger than that. We have Manchester, we have Liverpool, we have Birmingham, we have northern accents. We have also the Scottish accent, the Welsh accent, different accents. And not all of them are easy to understand. So we have, different accents when we are dealing with the different British business people. But no matter where they're from, no matter what accents they have some typically common characteristics when it comes to doing business with the British. So that's what I want to share with you. So I want you to imagine that you are going to attend, you have a business meeting. And it could be that you are, for the first time coming to the UK, you've arranged a meeting with business clients or business colleagues, in the UK office. So tip number one is try your hardest to be punctual. at a meeting. If you have an appointment with the British, they like you to be punctual. I remember when I used to arrange my appointments with my clients and I arrange a fixed time, then they expect you to be there. If for whatever reason you can't make it to that meeting, then make sure, or you're late in arriving at that meeting, make sure you call them and let them know. So you could say, I'm terribly sorry, I'm running late, or, I'm stuck in traffic, I'll be with you in 10-15 minutes. So, it's good practice to let them know, because the British do not like to start meetings late. So let them know, but they will understand if you're a bit late. Tip 2, when you then arrive at your meeting, it's how do we look at the business greeting? How do you greet people? And I often see this, so what we would normally do is as you arrive, you want to always shake someone's hand, shake their hand, and give them a firm handshake. Please don't do this limp handshake, which, it doesn't really give a good impression. And what you want to do is a firm handshake, give them, brief eye contact, nice smile, and, sort of say, pleased to meet you. It's a pleasure to meet you. Oh, so good to see you again. Whatever. Now, for this class, don't forget, I've got a copy of all these tips. So you don't have to worry if you're trying to take notes of what I'm saying. But that business greeting is important. So first of all, get that handshake, look at them in the eye briefly and smile and say, good morning, great to meet you, pleased to meet you, it's a pleasure to meet you. Hi Vio, nice to see you again. Yes, hi Arshana. I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly. So be punctual, nice business greeting as you arrive. Now, the other tip I have, and a question that a lot of my clients ask me, is how formal and informal are we at meetings? Now, in the past, meetings were very formal in terms of how you greeted people. And things have changed over time. I mean, when I started, even then it was beginning to get quite relaxed. So I normally say to people that when you are if you're meeting people for the first time, it's always useful to address them by their last name or surname, as we would say, their last name. So for example, if it was you're meeting Mr. Johnson, you would arrive and say, good afternoon, I'm Shanti Kumaraswamy Street, lovely to meet you, or it's great to meet you, Mr. Johnson. And so, address them by Mr., Mrs., and then their last name. More often than not, they will probably turn around and say, please call me Mark, Tony, Simon. So, often people now, you talk to each other on first name terms, even with senior management. When I joined companies, even my chief executive officer, my CEO, we were invited to call them by their first name, not by the Mr. or whatever. So, different cultures are different, but in Britain, you're not expected to. But I always think that it's not about being taught too formal, but I think it's a sign of respect and politeness to at least ask some, address them first by their last name and then wait for them to offer for you to address them by their first name. So if they say, please call me, and then you could turn around and say, please call me Shanti. So then you have reciprocated. I think that's useful. I mean, I know that a lot of businesses now, I'm sure you have this where you have marketing phone calls and people will call and go, hello, is that Shanti? Oh, that drives me nuts. Because I think, just a little bit of formality, a little bit of politeness would be great. So, I think that would be, very useful. And I think it's nothing wrong with being formal and polite. And then once they say to you, please call me by, then that's it. Then the rest of the meeting can continue with first name terms. Hello, Kelly. Nice to see that you've joined. I'm so glad you liked this topic on British culture. I will be covering more on that about British culture in, other lessons. So don't you worry about that. So here, formal, informal in terms of your meetings. So, and so therefore we have this first name terms, what we call first name terms. Now you're starting the meeting, and what you want to do then is before we start any meeting, the British like to do some small talk. We like to engage in small talk. So don't go straight down to business. We like a bit. And typically the conversations could be, did you find us okay? So, maybe you had to catch the tube, or you had to take the train to get to the offices. So they'll ask you, did you get here okay? Was the traffic all right? Oh, I'm so glad. Were the directions okay? And so you have to engage in that sort of conversation. Even when you're sitting around the table, meeting table. So they like to ask, a live talk? I don't understand what you mean, Vio. What do you mean a live talk or opinions? They could ask, normally we're talking about things like the weather. Gosh, it's a terrible day today, isn't it? Oh, we've been having such lovely weather recently. The British like to talk about the weather. We are slightly obsessed with that. We don't always get great weather, so we do that. Sometimes if the meeting is where you know each other, then people could talk about sport. For example, if there's a big event at the moment, we've got Champions League in the Europe for football. So, if it's male dominated, then people will talk about the football results. If you're a woman, I don't tend to talk about football. But we like to engage in that. So it could be very different things, the traffic, the weather, perhaps if you are a new, someone who's just come from abroad for a meeting, they could say, is this the first time here in London, or is it the first time to Manchester? Do you have time to visit the city, and then they start having that small talk. So it's really, a good idea. So bye, Vio. Good luck with your assignment. Useful. Now, by the way, just a quick digression. Small talk is an important thing. And I recently sent a survey to my readers. I'm sure some of you probably are included in that, where I asked about what courses you'd like to see for next year. And funnily enough, small talk was a big winner. So watch this space, because I will be launching shortly a course on small talk, in particular how to engage in small talk with the British people. So I will keep you posted on that. Okay, so we have small talk. So we've covered that. Now we get into the meeting. Okay, now another tip. This is tip 5. It's very important to be diplomatic in business with the British. Now, I've said this before where in my blog post that the English language is a polite language. Yes, we use a lot of please, we use a lot of thank yous. In fact, some other cultures might find it sometimes when they write to the British, if you're too direct, it comes across as rude, as arrogant. So you need to use little words to soften your language. And it's the same when you're doing business with the British, whether you're doing it on by written format or in a meeting like how we're talking now. So if you're in a meeting, try, use polite language. Don't be too direct. So, for example, if you have to say, say, for example, you need a decision. Now, saying, I want a decision now is not going to get you the results you want. So we try and soften it. And we could say, it would be very helpful if we could come to a decision by the end of this meeting. Yeah, say you need a decision being made at that meeting. So, it'll be really helpful. If you could do that for me, I would really appreciate it. So, not so much the do it now, I want it now. you're not going to get very much out of the British if you're not less direct. Use verbs like modal verbs. Use verbs like should, would, could. Yeah, so if, for example, someone's expecting an answer from you, or they want you to get some sales figures in, and you know it's going to be difficult, but, you know, to just say, well, we can't get you the sales figures now, right? Okay, that's a bit direct. Perhaps you could say, you know, it shouldn't take us too long. It shouldn't take us too long to get those figures. Let me see what I can do, and I'll get those for you. So it shouldn't take us too long. If you could have a word with the suppliers to see what could be possible, you know, it might sound to some cultures that, really, can we not just be a bit more direct? Yes, I know, sometimes it's really annoying, but you're not going to get very far if you're too direct. So, you know, try and be diplomatic. Look at using some modal verbs. I do share with this in the post that I will share with you later. So, you know, there's some things that we can build on that point. So that's tip number 5. So be diplomatic. Please and thank yous, always very important. Now, also, try and include some humor in your meetings when you're dealing. You know, the British have a great sense of humor. They're famous for their sense of humor. You know, the English are also very good. The British, because it includes also the Scottish and the Welsh. They are very good at also laughing at themselves. They don't take themselves terribly seriously. So, you know, and there are some cultures that misunderstand that. I know some Americans don't quite understand the British sense of humor, but it's just great. And if we use some humor, particularly also if you're, for example, in a business meeting that is particularly tense, there are a lot of big issues going on, and, you know, you're a bit, you know, at the moment, and you could just release that tension maybe with a bit of, you know, a little bit of humor, or, you know, go, gosh, I don't know about you, but it's getting really hot in this room, isn't it? Oh, you know, I feel, you know, it doesn't have to be about telling jokes. It's about just making your colleagues or your clients feel a bit more relaxed. So there are ways that you can do that, but, you know, we do like to have some humor, and they will also make little jokes. And, you know, so sometimes that can be a bit confusing, but it's what we do. It's what they like to do. And so, you know, that's useful to have. Tip number 7 is to back up your statements. What do I mean by backing up your statements? Imagine you're in a meeting and you are giving a short presentation about something. You're talking about your company, you're talking about your service, you're talking about your products. And then you are making certain claims. Say, for example, you're saying, well, our latest product is the best on the market. Last year, the sales quadrupled, blah, 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 blah. And you're just talking. And, okay, sounds good. Can you give us a proof? I mean, everyone in business wants to see proof. You know, you can't just have words. We want to see that. But what I mean is also, in terms of backing up your statements, is don't use too much emotional language when you're in a meeting with the British. Don't go on about, you know, it's like, I really, I've put so much work into this project, and I really would be, I would be just so devastated if it didn't work, or, using that sort of language. It's not going to work in your business environment. It's great for reality television. It's great for the media, where, you'll watch something like X Factor, and, the person will say, this has always been my dream to do this, and the other. Yeah, great, wonderful. It's been your dream, but it's not going to get you very far. So you want to stay neutral. Don't put too much emotion. You want to show enthusiasm, but don't get too too emotional about things, and always back your statements with facts. If they want facts, they need to see them. So, you know, that's one thing to bear in mind. Although the British, we have adopted a lot of Americanisms, as I would say, in terms of how we do the sales pitch, how we do certain things. But there is still certain things about maybe the American rah that make the British uncomfortable. They don't really like that. So, you know, although you would see that, it doesn't come naturally to them, and so they wouldn't appreciate that coming from somebody else. Now, it'd be interesting to know from your point of view in terms of your cultures. Obviously, you have to adapt from your culture also. You know, you're adapting to make it as much yourself, and then adapting to this British way of doing business. So yeah, that's just, you know, as I say, don't put too much emotion into it. Stay fairly neutral, and, you know, but inject some humor into your meetings. So that's tip number 7. Tip number 8, which follows on from this emotion, is don't talk too much about yourself. In other words, don't self-promote. Don't tell people how wonderful you are. It's a funny thing, this, about the British, that I've always found really weird, because on the one hand, we want to be successful. We work towards being successful, but we do not like people who are very pleased with themselves. What I mean is someone who says, look at me, aren't I great? I'm wonderful. You know, I built this business, and I'm now, you know, I'm now running this multi-million-pound business. Aren't I great? Don't you just all want to follow me? No. What you'll find is the British will be the first to bring you right down back to reality. They don't like that. The British are very, very modest. In fact, I would say sometimes too modest. Because, you know, sometimes it's good to say, you know, you've done well. Be proud of what you've achieved. But we like the be proud in a soft and quiet tone. Don't shout to everyone about how wonderful you are. No, be modest. Sometimes we talk about false modesty because we think, you know, come on, it's nothing wrong to be proud of what you've achieved. But often if you say to, I'm sure you've heard this, where the British will, you know, you did really well. Oh, thank you. No, really. Oh, it was nothing. No, thanks. But thank you so much. But, you know, you did a really good job there. So say, for example, you're given a presentation, you're at a conference. I see this all the time. So someone comes to me, and you know, I've adopted this Britishness. They'll go, oh, Shanti, you know, that was a really good talk. I really enjoyed it. Oh, thanks. So, oh, no, really, seriously, oh, thanks so much. No, but, you know, I really loved what you did. You know, so immediately changes to the other person. Because it doesn't, because if I walked around going, yeah, I know, wasn't I so great? Oh, I mean, you know, it was just incredible, that wonderful talk I gave. If I did that, I would have my British clients or customers or colleagues going, ooh, she's very pleased with herself, isn't she? Let's have a look at what else she's done and perhaps find the mistakes she has made. So don't, you know, beware. Don't be too sort of pleased with yourself. That does not mean, though, that you cannot be proud of your company, proud of the products, proud of your team or your services. That is good. That, talking to people and saying, you know, we have a great product, we have a good service, our team has worked really well, and I'm so proud of my team. So what we want to do is to make it about somebody else, not make it about you. So if you're talking about a team, it's all about the team. It's not about this one person. So, you know, that's something to bear in mind, particularly if you are promoting something. We like teamwork. We like to sort of talk about, and then having this modesty of, it's not this, you know, it's not all about you. So there you go. So don't self-promote. Be careful. And tip number 9 I hope this is okay. Please let me know. I'm not getting many comments, so I'm not too sure. But tip number 9 is dress code. Because many people ask me about the dress code, about when they have to go into meetings. Now, it's interesting. The British are quite formal in how they dress when for work. Particularly, I mean, I look at London. For men, they tend to dress in dark clothes and Roberta, I'll come back to you in just a second, okay? You're asking me, I'm so sorry, I've just interrupted. Hi, Shanti, what about when it comes to conference call meetings? I personally find it very hard to find a connection with the person on the other side of the phone. Okay, let's deal with that in a minute, okay? I'll like to know more. Can you give me more? I don't know whether I can see most of your comment, actually. But give me some examples. How you, yes, the conference call meetings are different. I think we need to also look at that. It might be something that I pick up on another lesson, perhaps, Roberta. But you make a very good point there. Conference call meetings. How do you engage when you can't actually see the person? Good point. I like that. Let me get back to you on that one. I will look into that. And I think, so let me just finish my tips, okay? So tip number 9 is the dress code. Your dress code. The British, we are quite formal, particularly men. Men tend to dress in dark suits, even if it's in summer, but you know, we don't get much of a summer. So dark suits, dark shoes. Women, we are in dress suits or trouser suits, a lot of them, so we tend to do that. In the last few years, I mean, certainly when I was working, we have often Fridays are casual Friday or dress down Friday. I'm sure you have that in your offices. And so in that case, people tend to come in smart casual. But I have to say, not if you have a client meeting. If you have a client meeting, to arrive smart casual might not be giving the right impression. Unless, of course, you're in different industries. For example, the IT industry, the fashion industry tends to be a bit more relaxed, so there might be a different dress code. But certainly, if you're meeting people for the first time, then you need to look smart and you need to look business-like. Certainly in the City of London, people are still very, very conservative in how they dress. Men wear a lot of pinstripe suits, and you know, that's what they do. And women are in skirts or trouser suits. So that's very much the case. Now, finally, my final tip is about the actual meetings. If you're in a business meeting with the British, the meetings don't always end with all the points in your agenda having been finalized and decided. Quite often, the British will end up the meeting with an agreement to meet for the next meeting to finish off some of the items on the agenda, if there are any outstanding items. And to be honest, it's no point fighting that, because that's just how it is. Because very rarely are we prepared for that many meetings, unless of course it's a client meeting. For example, when I was in investment management and we had a client meeting where we were going to be talking about the client's investments and their portfolio, then of course you'd be prepared. You'd have the portfolio valuations, you'd be ready for the client. And then, of course, there's a conclusion. But say, for example, you've got business-to-business meetings where you are discussing possible initiatives, business initiatives or arrangements or relationships, then you might have a number of meetings. And maybe not all of the items on your agenda have been covered. So in that case, don't be too surprised. Also, we often have situations where a point that isn't in the agenda gets brought up. People start asking about that and they go, oh, I'd like to talk. Oh, is that in the agenda? No, but I wanted to discuss this because this is an important point that we need to discuss. And the people will go, okay, fine, okay, let's discuss it. I know in some other cultures it's a no-no, because if the items, the agenda, if it's not in the agenda, it doesn't get discussed. With the British, yeah, let's add it, and let's then we might make another meeting to discuss the points that were not raised during this meeting. So I always say to my clients, if this is irritating, that's a bit the British way, and I say go with the flow. You know, don't fight it, because we do have that tendency of doing that, and there's not very much you can do unless, of course, it is an urgent meeting. It's very important that certain decisions are made. Then you'll have that situation that everyone has to come in and sit down and start working and make a decision at the end of that meeting. So those are my 10 tips. Yes, Kelly has just said nothing ever goes to plan with meetings over here. You're absolutely right, Kelly. Yeah, you and me, we understand each other very much. So you could have this agenda and you have all the items set out, and you know, maybe you'd have had maybe 3 or 4 items covered, and then, you know, somebody else will come in with some problem they have, and you know, and it depends, I suppose, also on how strict the chairman is, or the chairperson is of the meeting, to say let's stick to it. But very rarely are they that strict. So yeah, so it can be really frustrating, but that's just, you know, this idea that the British have it all organized. No, they're not. They're not that. They're the sort of, you know, they like to have that flexibility, as it were, and you just have to go with that. So those are the 10 tips. So a quick recap for you. So we looked at how, if you're going to be late for a meeting, always inform the people, because in business, especially the British, they like to be punctual. I remember when I used, you know, and especially if I had to travel a lot and I knew I was going to be late, I would inform my clients, because there was nothing worse. So tell them, let them know that you're running late or whatever, but be punctual. And the next thing is that when you meet them, then to give them a good handshake, brief look at the smile, firm handshake, and then pleased to meet you, good to meet you. In terms of formality and the business greetings and the formality, it all depends. I always think if you've never met someone before, then I would take first name, last name, and the title, so Mr. and Mrs. And so then we have small talk. We get into that little bit of small talk. Be diplomatic, be polite, don't be too direct. We don't like directness. Back up your statements, use some humor. The British always use humor. We're always having a little joke here and a little joke there. And don't promote yourself too much. We don't like that. Don't talk about yourself. Talk about your company. Talk about your services. But don't go on about how wonderful you are. Not good. And your dress code, as we talked about, in terms of formal and informal, but it would be more formal. And as I say, go with the flow in terms of how the meeting progresses, because you could have topics that are off the agenda that are discussed. Roberta, I'm coming back to you. So to give you, Roberta says here, to give you an example, we're talking conference calls here. To give you an example, I often have calls with British and Americans, and at the end of the conversation, I'm used to greeting nicely, and let me just see, because I need to have a look at that. I can't see your comment, which is very annoying. Let me just see. I am used to greeting them nicely and longer. Is this at the end? So as you're saying goodbye to them, and what happens? Are they quite abrupt? Is that what you're saying, Roberta? I'm going to go onto my Facebook page so I can see the comments. Do bear with me 1 second, because I can't read your comment, which is most annoying. So are they quite abrupt? They say, okay, bye everybody, goodbye. And because if they are, that tends to happen with conference calls particularly, because right, okay everyone, and I wouldn't take it too personally. I think it's just, you know, people then are already being, and don't forget with conference calls, just a very quick point, I know this got, it's that we get distracted with conference calls, don't we? Because we're doing other things too. It's different when you're in the middle of a meeting face to face. With conference calls, you've got your phone, you're doing something else, and they can get distracted. or maybe the line is not so clear. But let me just see what you're saying here. Roberta, oh yes, I can see. The same for the, to find, I personally find very hard to find a connection with a person. Okay, and then you said something else, didn't you? You say to give you, I do not hear the same. So I'm used to greeting nicely and longer, making clear that I'm smiling when I say goodbye. I do not hear the same from the other person. To the yeah, you know, I think it's but that's, it could be also the person, because I quite frankly think, yes, it's important to smile, and the moment you start smiling, the sound of your voice, and you can hear that. So yes, I totally agree with you, and that can be frustrating. I don't think that's necessarily British thing. Is it a British thing? It could be. It depends on the people you're really dealing with. It depends also how you start the conversation on the conference call. It's engaging. Are you running that conference call? Are you engaging with them? You know, some people are going to be abrupt, and there's very little you can do sometimes to change that. And particularly if, you know, they've got other things to do. And I think with conference calls, as I say, they get distracted by other things, and they forget the niceties, as I would say, of business communication, good communication. And so, you know, that can happen. So yeah, unfortunate, but that's hard. But you know, you've given me a good idea, Roberta. Yes, I gathered that you were Italian, and that, you know, I will look at that in terms of how we can get more engagement, certainly on conference calls and conference meetings, because that's more and more what people are doing. So that's the end of today's class, everyone. As usual, I've run over my 30 minutes. I get carried away, as I'm sure you know. I hope you found that useful. Now, don't forget that I will be posting the blog post that I wrote about this post, about how to do business with the British. And as I mentioned before, I will be, and I'm really excited about this, I am putting together, as we speak, a mini course on engaging in small talk, particularly with the British. And because, you know, small talk has a huge cultural element to it. And, you know, I think and I learned it through my 20-year experience doing business in the UK, having to learn what you need to do. And I think I would like to do that. And that's great, Poonam. Well, I will be putting together that course and letting you know, because that's a great way of just finding out how to do it and feel more comfortable when you have to engage in small talk, particularly with the British. We start off with the British, then we can look at other things. Oh, you're still watching and doing your assignments, Vio. I love that. Multitasking. Fantastic. Good job. I hope the assignment is it's flow. I hope my lesson helped the assignment flow more quickly and easily. There you go. But listen, guys, so don't forget, I will have that blog post, and don't forget to sign up to my free e-guide if you want, into looking at the 10 ways to communicate better in English for business. And because, of course, that includes a bit of small talk, and we also look at non-verbal communication, which is another thing that's very important. But anyway, in the meantime, thank you so much for engaging with me, for being here, listening to my lesson, and also for making notes and, you know, engaging here and taking time out to listen to this. The recording will be put onto the Facebook page, but as I say, go sign up to my guide. I'll be letting you know more about the small talk course in due course, and then you will be able to share that hopefully with other people. But in the meantime, this is me saying ciao for now. Shanti Kumaraswamy Street from English with a Twist. Thank you so much for joining me on Wednesdays with English with a Twist, and I hope to see you guys all next week, 30th of November at 3 o'clock GMT for another class. Let's see. Let me know what you would like to to learn about. Otherwise, watch this space when I deliver another class. In the meantime, keep following the page, keep following my blogs, and I'll see you then. Ciao!